Melissa Walker woke up before the alarm clock rang. She reached over to her husband's side of the bed, but Greg's spot was already empty, the sheets cold. He must have left early for the job site. His construction company had recently taken on a big project, and his absences were becoming more and more frequent. "Mom." Lily took my hairbrush again. Melissa let out a deep sigh and got out of bed. The children's bickering from upstairs was like a ritual announcing the start of a new day. As she put on her bathrobe, she mentally reviewed her schedule for the day. A meeting at the accounting firm, a parent-teacher conference at Lily's school, preparing dinner, and Greg was supposed to come home early tonight. "Jason, Lily, breakfast is ready." Melissa called up the stairs from the kitchen. The coffee maker released a fresh aroma, and the toaster gave off the fragrant smell of wheat. The first to come running down the stairs was 8-year-old Lily, wearing pink pajamas, her bright blonde hair still messy from sleep. "Mom, you have to come to my class presentation today." "I'm going to recite a poem," Lily said, hugging her mother. "Of course I will. I promised, didn't I?" Melissa smiled, gently stroking her daughter's hair. 15-year-old Jason appeared next. He had grown taller, and his voice had started to change. He was already on his way to becoming a young man. But this morning, his face showed signs of fatigue. "Good morning, Jason. Did you sleep well?" Melissa asked, looking closely at her son's face. "I guess," he answered briefly and took orange juice from the refrigerator. Sitting at the breakfast table, Melissa observed Jason carefully. Lately, he seemed more withdrawn. Was it just normal teenage behavior, or was there something troubling him? "Where's Dad?" Lily asked while pouring syrup on her pancakes. "Dad left early for work. Today is the start of a big job site," Melissa answered cheerfully. In truth, she didn't know what time Greg had left. He had come home late last night, after Melissa had already fallen asleep. After breakfast, Melissa sent the children off to their respective schools. When she returned home, she started on her own work. Her career at the accounting firm was stable and had become an important pillar supporting the family's lifestyle. By evening, the family gathered again. Greg had unusually returned home early and had promised dinner with the family. As Melissa was preparing lasagna in the kitchen, she heard the front door open. "I'm home." Greg's voice echoed, and Lily shouted, "Daddy," as she ran to the entrance. Greg came into the kitchen carrying Lily and gave Melissa a kiss on the cheek. "You worked hard today," Melissa said with a smile. "Yes, it was a busy day. But the new project is off to a good start," Greg answered, loosening his tie. With the whole family gathered at the dinner table, Greg began talking about the day's events. Lily enthusiastically talked about practicing her poem recitation at school, and Melissa felt proud of her daughter's enthusiasm. However, Jason was quieter than usual. He just pushed his food around with his fork, barely participating in the conversation. "Jason, how was school?" Greg asked his son. "Fine," Jason answered with a shrug, keeping it short. Just then, Greg's smartphone rang. Looking at the screen, his expression changed for a moment. "Sorry, I have to take this," he said and left the table. After Greg left the room, Melissa noticed Jason deep in thought. "Is something wrong?" Melissa asked gently. Jason looked at her for a moment, with an expression that suggested he wanted to say something, but quickly answered, "No, nothing." When Greg returned, the conversation resumed normally, but a small worry had sprouted in Melissa's heart. Something felt off. Not just Jason's behavior, but also Greg's reaction to the phone call felt strange. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, Melissa was reading a book in bed waiting for Greg. He had secluded himself in his study, saying he had paperwork to sort out. While feeling grateful for their happy family life, Melissa couldn't shake a small uneasiness that lingered in her heart. She heard the sound of the shower. Greg must have gone into the bathroom. Melissa closed her book and placed it on the bedside table. Her eyes fell on Greg's jacket lying on the floor. As she went to pick it up, a piece of paper slipped out of the pocket. It was a receipt from an unfamiliar restaurant. Dinner for two. The date was 3 days ago, a day when Greg had said he would be working late at the site. Must be a business dinner, Melissa told herself, returning the receipt to the pocket. But she couldn't completely dismiss the question that had arisen in the corner of her mind. Melissa's daily routine continued, hectic as always, with no apparent changes on the surface. She continued to be the center of the family, balancing work and home life day after day. But when night came and she had quiet time to think alone, she couldn't get that receipt out of her mind. Greg became increasingly busy, and the phrase, "big project," was frequently heard from his lips. Their conversations grew shorter, often limited to just necessities. Still, Melissa told herself that his dedication to work was for the family's sake. "Let's go camping as a family this weekend," Greg suddenly suggested during dinner one evening. It was a family surprise after a long time. Lily jumped up from her chair and applauded with joy. "Yay! Will we sleep in a tent? Can we see the stars?" Melissa smiled too, saying, "That's a lovely idea." Seeing Greg's commitment to family time made the small doubt within her fade. However, she noticed Jason's expression hardening across the table. He put down his fork and stared at his father. "I'm not going." The dinner table conversation stopped. Melissa was surprised by her son's words and asked, "Why?" "I have too much homework," Jason said, lowering his gaze and continuing to eat. Greg frowned. "You can finish your homework by Friday. This is family time, and we're all going." "I said I don't want to go." Jason's voice raised as he stood up, pulling his chair. "I'll eat in my room." He took his plate and headed to his room. Lily silently looked at both parents' faces, and Melissa gave Greg an apologetic look. "It's the teenage years," she said to her husband. Greg shrugged and said, "I guess so, can't be helped," but there was a hint of tension in his voice. After dinner, Melissa knocked on Jason's door. "May I come in?" Receiving a faint response, she entered to find Jason lying on his bed, looking at his smartphone. Melissa sat on the edge of the bed. "What's wrong? Is something bothering you?" Jason was silent for a moment before answering, "No, I'm fine." His eyes never left his smartphone screen. "Is something going on between you and Dad?" Melissa asked carefully. Jason seemed to freeze for a moment. Then he said, "No," while clutching his smartphone to his chest. "You know you can always talk to me about anything," Melissa said, giving a light kiss on his forehead. "I'm always here to listen." As she left the room, Melissa heard Jason let out a deep sigh. It was clear that something was weighing on his mind. The worry that it might have something to do with Greg grew larger in Melissa's heart. The next day, Melissa received a call from Greg. "About the weekend camping trip, I've got an emergency business trip," he said, sounding tired. "A client's request that I couldn't refuse. I'm sorry about the kids." Melissa, trying to probe, asked, "Where are you going?" "Chicago. I'll leave Friday and plan to be back Sunday night," Greg answered matter-of-factly. "Please apologize to Lily especially. She was probably looking forward to it the most." After ending the call, Melissa tried to shake off the unease she felt. Greg was dedicated to his work, and plans sometimes changed. That was all. However, between Jason's behavior and Greg's sudden cancellation, she felt as if some invisible force was slowly starting to crumble the family's everyday life. The weekend passed, and on Tuesday afternoon, as normal routines resumed, Melissa was pushing a shopping cart at the local supermarket. Checking her list while selecting groceries for the week, she muttered, "Milk, bread, eggs. and headed to the dairy section when she suddenly felt someone's gaze. Turning around, she saw a woman staring at her. The attractive woman showed a surprised expression when her eyes met Melissa's, and quickly looked away. Melissa wondered, "Do I know her?" but was certain she had never seen that face before. However, the woman's reaction was obviously unusual. When Melissa looked at her again, the woman hastily picked up her shopping basket and moved to another aisle. Something felt off, but Melissa continued shopping. On her way to the checkout, she spotted the woman again, but when the woman noticed Melissa, she hurriedly paid and left the store. How strange, Melissa thought as she drove home. That evening, Jason returned from school. Normally, he would either start his homework in the living room or play games in his room. However, as soon as he entered the house, he asked, "Where's Dad?" "He's not home yet. He said he'd be a little late today," Melissa answered, observing her son. "Why?" "No reason," Jason answered vaguely and started climbing the stairs. "Jason," Melissa called, stopping him. "Is there something you want to talk to Dad about?" Jason paused halfway up the stairs and turned around. His expression seemed conflicted. "No, it's nothing important." "Are you sure?" "Mom," Jason began but stopped. "No, it's nothing." He went into his room and closed the door. Melissa stared at that door, feeling the anxiety growing in her chest. It was unusual for Jason, who normally didn't pay much attention to his father, to be concerned about Greg's whereabouts. Did he know something? That night, Greg came home after 10 p.m. Melissa was waiting for him in the living room. "Sorry I'm late," Greg said, looking a bit tired. "It was a tough day." "Jason was looking for you," Melissa said directly. "Oh." Greg responded while taking off his coat. "Did he need something?" "I don't know. But he seems concerned about something." Greg appeared to ponder Melissa's words for a moment but quickly said, "I'll talk to him tomorrow." The next day, Melissa was organizing Greg's work-related documents. His home office was scattered with blueprints and contracts related to construction projects, and Melissa occasionally helped organize them. When she took out a card holder from the desk drawer, she noticed a photo partially visible inside. It was a photo of a woman. Melissa's fingertips trembled. It looked like the woman she had seen at the supermarket. Just as she was about to pull out the photo, she heard the door open. "What are you doing?" Melissa turned to see Greg entering the room. His expression was unreadable. Melissa hurriedly returned the card holder to its original place. "I was just organizing your papers," she answered, trying to appear calm. "They were messy." Greg stared at her hands, then shifted his gaze to the card holder. "Thanks. But I'll do it myself." He took the card holder and put it in his jacket pocket. Melissa wanted to say something, but no words came out. After Greg left the room, Melissa sank into a chair. Her heart was beating fast. Something is wrong, she thought. The strange encounter at the supermarket, Jason's unusual behavior, and Greg's secrets, they all seemed to be connected somehow. After the school choir competition ended, Melissa proudly embraced Lily. Lily's class had won second place, and she had performed a special solo part beautifully. Jason had also come to see his sister's performance as his school had let out early. He showed an unusually bright expression and gently patted Lily's head. "You were amazing, Lily. Your voice was like an angel's." Lily looked up at her brother, embarrassed but happy. "Thank you, Jason." Melissa felt warmth in her heart watching the children. Jason had recently been moody and seemed distant from the family. It had been a while since he showed such a gentle expression. It was unfortunate that Greg was busy with work again and couldn't attend the competition, but they had spent a fulfilling time. "Let's go home now. I'll make a special dinner to celebrate," Melissa said with a smile. "What would you like, Lily?" Mom's lasagna. Lily answered without hesitation. I want that too, Jason agreed. Melissa took the children to the parking lot and got into the car. It was already past 5 p.m., and the sky was beginning to take on the colors of dusk. On the way home, Melissa looked at Jason through the rearview mirror. He was looking at his smartphone, once again with a contemplative expression. Jason, what are you looking at? Huh? He looked up, surprised. Just social media. Melissa was about to say something but stopped. Jason had seemed a bit more settled the past few days. She didn't want to disrupt that again. As the car entered the residential area and their home came into view, Melissa noticed a suspicious scene. A police car was parked in front of their house. The blue and red rotating lights cast an eerie glow on the quiet residential street. Is that in front of our house? Melissa voiced her thoughts. Mom, police. Lily asked anxiously. Jason leaned forward, staring intently out the window. Did something happen? His voice was filled with tension. Feeling a tightening sensation in her chest, Melissa accelerated the car. What was happening? Was Greg all right? Various possibilities raced through her mind. Upon arriving at the house, 2 uniformed officers were standing outside. Melissa hurriedly parked the car and got out with the children. Is this the Walker residence? One officer approached. Yes, I'm Melissa Walker. What happened? Melissa asked with a trembling voice. Please don't enter, the other officer shouted. We're currently conducting a safety check. Safety check? What do you mean? Melissa was confused. My husband. Is Greg inside? Your husband appears to be absent at the moment, the officer answered calmly. We received a report of a suspicious person entering from a neighbor and are investigating. A suspicious person. Melissa looked at the house. The light leaking through the windows showed that someone was inside. At that moment, Jason grabbed Melissa's sleeve. His hand was ice cold and trembling. Mom. His face had gone pale. I think I might know something about this. Melissa was surprised by her son's expression and asked, What do you mean? Jason looked around, confirming that the officers were talking a short distance away, then began speaking in a low voice. Yesterday, I saw an unfamiliar woman lurking in front of our house. I've seen her with Dad before. Melissa's heart nearly stopped. With Dad? When? Where? Last month, at the mall. Dad said he was on a business trip, but... Jason's words faltered. They were holding hands. I thought I was seeing things, but... Melissa felt a headache coming on. The woman from the supermarket. The photo hidden in Greg's card holder. And now, a suspicious person who had broken into her house. Everything was starting to connect. Mom, I'm scared, Lily gripped her hand. It's okay, Melissa tried to smile at Lily, but her expression was stiff. The officer returned. We've assessed the situation. Inside is 1 woman and 1 child. The woman claims to be an acquaintance of your husband. A child. Melissa couldn't believe her ears. The officer continued with a confused expression. Yes, a boy about 10 years old. The woman appears to have had a key to your husband's house, so it may not be breaking and entering. We'd like to discuss this further. Melissa was no longer listening to the officer. She slowly turned toward the house and approached the living room window. She could vaguely see inside through the curtains. Looking through the window, she saw a young woman standing in the living room. It was the woman from the supermarket. And beside her, there was indeed a child. Melissa's legs froze. It was a boy of about 10, with facial features remarkably similar to Lily's. The same eye shape, the same nose, and above all, a mouth that resembled Greg's. That child is. Melissa gasped, at a loss for words. I think he's Dad's child, Jason said quietly. I found her posts on social media. Dad was in the photos of the boy's birthday party. Melissa closed her eyes. Several memories raced through her mind like a film reel. Greg's late returns, frequent business trips, and sudden cancellations. Were they all lies? Had he been spending time with another family? Ma'am, are you all right? The officer asked Melissa. Melissa opened her eyes as if regaining consciousness. With trembling hands, she took out her smartphone and called Greg. The ringtone continued, but there was no answer. He doesn't answer, Melissa murmured. The officer showed a sympathetic expression. Let me explain the situation. The woman inside is named Vanessa Clark, and she claims to have a relationship with your husband, Greg Walker. She entered using a key. She says it was given to her by your husband. Feeling a painful ache in her heart, Melissa looked at her children's faces. Jason stood frozen with an expression mixing anger and sadness, while Lily was confused and trembling with fear. Can I take the children somewhere safe? Melissa asked in a shaking voice. Of course. I recommend staying with relatives or at a hotel until the situation is resolved, the officer answered. We'll question Ms. Clark further. Melissa sent Jason and Lily back to the car. She took one last look at the house. She felt the illusion of the family she thought she had built crumbling before her eyes. Mom, what are we going to do? Jason asked when she returned to the car. Melissa took a deep breath and answered, First, we'll go to a hotel. And then, we'll face the truth. As she started the car engine, she realized that her life had changed forever from this moment on. In a hotel room in the city, Melissa sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the night view outside the window. On the adjacent bed, Lily had finally cried herself to sleep. Jason seemed to be taking a shower, as water sounds could be heard from the bathroom. According to the police, a woman named Vanessa Clark admitted to having a relationship with Greg, claiming it had been ongoing for 5 years. According to her, Greg spent time with her and her son Michael as a family and had promised to become an official family, eventually. Melissa looked at her smartphone. All calls to Greg were being forwarded to voicemail. He seemed to be rejecting all her calls. The last message she sent was simple and clear, call me immediately. For the children's sake. Jason came out of the bathroom. He had red eyes but seemed to be trying to regain his composure after washing his face. Mom, are you okay? He sat next to Melissa. Yes, no, Melissa answered honestly. But I will be. Because I have you all. Jason was silent for a moment before saying in a small voice, I knew but didn't tell you. I'm sorry. Melissa hugged her son. It's not your fault. I'm sorry for letting you carry such a burden alone. I can't forgive him. Dad, Jason's voice trembled with anger. It's okay to be emotional right now, Melissa said gently. But starting tomorrow, we need to think about what to do. Just then, Melissa's smartphone rang. It was a call from an unknown number. Hello. Mrs. Walker. This is Detective Morrison from the police, a male voice responded. I'm calling to report on the situation. Ms. Clark has left the house and is currently staying with a friend. We plan to take her formal statement tomorrow. Thank you, Melissa responded flatly. Did she say anything? The detective hesitated a bit before answering. According to her, she met your husband 5 years ago, and their relationship began then. She says her son Michael is Mr. Walker's child and will turn 10 this year. She claims to have DNA test results as well. Melissa closed her eyes. 10 years ago. That was when she was pregnant with Lily. She was in an agitated state at the police station, the detective continued. She kept saying, Greg promised to be a family to us too. He's Michael's father, and he said he wouldn't abandon us. Also, she wanted me to tell you something. He's a liar, so be careful. After ending the call, Melissa didn't move for a long time. Various memories surfaced in her mind. The 10th wedding anniversary dinner that Greg suddenly cancelled. The reason he was late for Lily's birthday. And above all, the discomfort she felt every time he claimed to value family. Was it all a lie? Or were his feelings genuine for both families in his mind? In the morning, Melissa called a lawyer. She explained the situation and consulted about future steps. Gather evidence. Bank statements, phone records, anything, the lawyer advised calmly. While eating breakfast at the hotel, Melissa talked to the children about the future. We'll stay here for a while. I'll let the school know there are special circumstances. And, she continued, choosing her words carefully, I need to have a talk with your father. Dad won't come back home anymore. Lily asked anxiously. Melissa held Lily's hand. I don't know. But whatever happens, we are a family. That won't change. In the afternoon, Greg finally called. Melissa, his voice sounded tired. The situation is complicated. Complicated. Melissa's voice was cold. You've been living a double life, Greg. For 10 years. Let me explain, Greg pleaded. I'm coming home now. Let's talk there. The police are at the house. They're gathering evidence, Melissa replied. But yes, we need to talk. For the children's sake. That evening, Melissa and the children returned home. The police had already left, and the house was quiet. As they sat at the kitchen table waiting, they heard the front door open. Greg came in. He wasn't in his usual businessman attire but wore jeans and a t-shirt. His complexion was poor, with dark circles under his eyes. Melissa, kids, he said, forcing out his voice. Lily was watching her father with an upset expression. Jason had his arms crossed, directing a cold gaze at his father. Lily, please go to your room, Melissa said gently. The adults need to talk. Lily stood up anxiously and went upstairs. Jason too, Greg said. I'm staying, Jason said firmly. I'm not a kid anymore. I want to know everything. Greg stared at his son and eventually dropped his shoulders in resignation. All right. The three sat at the kitchen table. After a long silence, Greg opened his mouth. I'll tell everything. No hiding, he took a deep breath. I met Vanessa 10 years ago. When you were pregnant with Lily, he looked at Melissa. At first, it was just going to be an affair. But then she told me she was pregnant. And you didn't take responsibility? Melissa asked calmly. No, I did. I supported her and continued to meet regularly after the child was born. So you had two families? Jason asked accusingly. Greg held his head. Yes. I was foolish. But I loved both families. Love? Jason's voice rose. Liar. If you loved us, you wouldn't have led a double life. Calm down, Jason, Melissa placed a hand on her son's shoulder. Turning back to Greg, why weren't you honest? You could have divorced me and formed a new family with her. I didn't want to lose you all, Greg murmured. For the children, for you. That's not true, Melissa said quietly. You just did it for yourself. You wanted to have two worlds and didn't want to let go of either. Greg couldn't argue with that. What was Vanessa expecting? Melissa asked. Why did she come to the house? She reached her limit, Greg lowered his voice. She was angry that I wasn't keeping my promises. I told her we would start our life together soon, but I always postponed it. I knew all along. Jason suddenly shouted. When I looked at Dad's phone, there were pictures with another woman. And last month, I saw him at the mall with that woman and boy. Holding hands, like a family. Greg looked up, shocked, at his son. Jason, you. I couldn't say anything, tears flowed from Jason's eyes. I didn't want to hurt Mom. But. Melissa stood up and embraced her son. Then in a calm voice, she said to Greg, "Get out. Melissa, let's talk. We've had enough for today." Melissa's voice was filled with determination. "You go to a hotel tonight, or perhaps to Vanessa's place. Tomorrow, I'll contact you through my lawyer." Greg tried to resist but, faced with Melissa and Jason's cold expressions, silently stood up. He headed for the door and, turning back, said, "Tell the children. I love them." After the door closed, Jason asked Melissa, "Why didn't we notice?" Melissa exhaled deeply and answered, "Sometimes we turn a blind eye to the mistakes of those we love. But now it's time to face the truth." She looked up at the stairs and said, "I need to talk to Lily. It won't be easy, but we'll get through this together." That night, after the children had gone to sleep, Melissa sat alone in the living room, thinking about the future. Tomorrow would be the beginning of a new life. She needed to be strong. For the children, and for herself. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning, Melissa was making coffee in the kitchen of her new home. The morning sun dancing on the white counter shone through the window. The smaller house in a quiet suburban neighborhood wasn't as spacious as their previous home, but it was perfect for a new beginning. "Mom, I'll help you." Jason came into the kitchen. He had a more composed expression than before and looked a bit more mature. He continued weekly counseling and was gradually learning to face the past events. "Thank you," Melissa smiled while preparing toast. "Is Lily still sleeping?" "Yes, she seems tired from yesterday's field trip." Melissa picked up her coffee cup and headed to the living room. Papers were spread out on the table. In the past few months, she had leveraged her skills as an accountant to start a small consulting business. Her clients were gradually increasing, and she was steadily walking the path to financial independence. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. Greg had surprisingly readily agreed to the terms and promised to pay sufficient child support and compensation. His construction company had lost its reputation and many clients, but that was no longer Melissa's concern. According to the newspaper, although Greg had begun living with Vanessa and Michael, that relationship didn't seem to be going well either. Vanessa was beginning to realize that Greg's promises were hollow, and there were rumors that his cheating habits had been discovered. Ironically, Greg was on the verge of losing both families. "Mom." Jason came to the living room and sat next to Melissa. He said thoughtfully, "We're a real family, aren't we? I think family isn't just about blood relations." Melissa was moved by her son's growth and put her arm around his shoulder. "That's right. Family is something you choose. We chose each other and chose to support one another." The sound of small footsteps coming down the stairs was heard, and Lily appeared in her pajamas. "Good morning," she said in a sleepy voice. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Melissa answered with a smile. Lily had recently begun to understand about Michael's existence. The concept of half-brother was difficult, but she was trying to accept it in her own way. "Are we going to the beach today?" she asked as she started her breakfast. "Yes, everything is ready for our picnic." Melissa looked up at the clear sky outside the window. A few hours later, they arrived at the beach. Melissa spread out a blanket and watched the children play at the water's edge. A quiet peace spread in her heart. Truth sometimes brings pain, but from that pain, a new beginning is born, Melissa murmured. The wind carried her words away, but the feeling remained in her heart. She gazed at her children's smiling faces, proud of this new life.